ever wondered if some Elvis classics could have been even better? Did the king of rock and roll sometimes bow to his manager's commercial instincts at the expense of his artistic vision? The relationship between Elvis Presley and his enigmatic manager, Colonel Tom Parker, remains one of music's most fascinating and controversial partnerships. While Parker undeniably helped transform Elvis into a global superstar, his influence sometimes pushed the king in directions that compromised his musical integrity. Behind some of Elvis's most commercially successful tracks lie stories of creative battles, compromised visions, and what might have been. These 8 songs reveal moments when Parker's business-first mentality may have prevented Elvis from delivering the raw, authentic performances his talent promised. Number 8. Suspicious Minds, 1969. Have you ever noticed something odd about the fade out in Suspicious Minds? This iconic track, recorded during Elvis's creative rebirth at American Sound Studio in Memphis, almost didn't happen because of Colonel Parker's interference. Producer Felton Jarvis added a premature fade-out followed by a fade-in during the song's climax, a decision that puzzled many listeners and purportedly infuriated Elvis himself. The story behind this strange production choice reveals a lot about Parker's grip on Elvis's career. During the recording sessions, tensions were brewing between Parker and producer Chips Moman over publishing rights. Parker expected a share of publishing for Elvis recordings, something Moman flatly refused. The Colonel had already tried to cancel the Memphis sessions entirely, only reluctantly allowing them when Elvis insisted. Suspicious Minds became Elvis's final #1 hit during his lifetime, but the awkward fade-out, fade-in remains a permanent reminder of the business disputes happening behind the scenes. Jarvis reportedly added this unusual edit to make the song more commercial and to appease Parker's concerns about the track being too long for radio play. The original, unedited version, which music historians consider superior, remained unreleased for decades. Elvis biographer Peter Grolnick noted that Parker consistently pushed for commercial viability over artistic integrity, writing that the Colonel's primary concern was always marketability rather than musical innovation. The resulting compromise on Suspicious Minds left an indelible mark on what should have been a perfect comeback song. Despite its commercial success, many Elvis aficionados consider it a prime example of how Parker's business interests sometimes handicapped Elvis's artistic expression. Number 7. Old MacDonald, 1967. Can you imagine Elvis Presley, the rebellious rock icon who scandalized America with his hip movements, singing a nursery rhyme? Colonel Parker could. During the film years of the 1960s, Parker increasingly pushed Elvis toward family-friendly material that would broaden his commercial appeal while mitigating any perceived risks to his marketability. Old MacDonald, recorded for the soundtrack of the movie Double Trouble, stands as perhaps the most egregious example of the lightweight material Parker steered Elvis toward during his Hollywood years. By this point, Elvis had become deeply frustrated with the formulaic movies and soundtracks Parker arranged for him. These film commitments prevented him from keeping pace with evolving music trends as artists like the Beatles and the Rolling Stones revolutionized rock music. Recording engineer George Klein later revealed that Elvis completed this track in a single take, refusing to do another, saying, "That's enough of this crap." The song demonstrates how Parker's control over Elvis's career had reduced a boundary-pushing musical innovator to performing children's songs for quick profit. Music historian Colin Escott wrote of this period, "Parker saw Elvis as a commercial property to be exploited for maximum financial gain with minimum investment. The Colonel negotiated deals that prioritized quantity over quality, resulting in movies and soundtracks produced on strict budgets and tight schedules. For Parker, predictable profits trumped artistic growth. Elvis himself later admitted, "I'd like to do more serious things, but it's very hard to find the right material. The type of movies I do, they just don't take them seriously." This glimpse into Elvis's frustration reveals how Parker's business model trapped the artist in a cycle of creative disappointment, with Old MacDonald representing a particularly humiliating low point. Number 6. A Little Less Conversation, 1968. Did you know that one of Elvis's most recognizable songs today was originally a forgotten movie soundtrack throwaway? A Little Less Conversation was initially recorded for the film Live a Little, Love a Little in 1968, representing the kind of lightweight material Colonel Parker pushed Elvis toward during his movie years. The original version flopped, barely cracking the top 100 charts before disappearing from public consciousness. Parker had negotiated deals that required Elvis to produce high volumes of soundtrack material, often sacrificing quality for quantity. This approach led to songs like A Little Less Conversation being rushed through production with minimal creative input from Elvis himself. The irony is that this Parker-influenced track only became a massive hit decades later, when remixed by JXL in 2002, reaching #1 in over 20 countries. Music critics have pointed out that the remixed version actually restored some of the edge and excitement that was missing from the original recording, which had been watered down to fit Parker's commercial formula. Elvis's drummer, DJ Fontana, later commented, "The movie songs weren't bad songs, just not what Elvis wanted to record. The Colonel had him tied up in these movie contracts, and there wasn't much room to maneuver." Parker's control over Elvis's recording schedule meant that even when promising material like A Little Less Conversation came along, it often didn't receive the attention and artistic development it deserved. The song's resurrection decades later as a worldwide hit proves that the raw material of Elvis's talent remained evident even in these compromised recordings. Had Parker allowed Elvis more creative freedom during this period, songs like A Little Less Conversation might have made a bigger impact during Elvis's lifetime rather than requiring posthumous reinvention to reveal their true potential. Number 5. Bosa Nova Baby, 1963. Ever heard a song that feels like it's holding back? Bossa Nova Baby, featured in Elvis's 1963 film Fun in Acapulco, perfectly exemplifies how Colonel Parker's management decisions directly impacted Elvis's musical output. Originally recorded by the Leiber and Stoller duo for Tippy and the Clovers, Elvis's version should have been an opportunity to showcase his ability to interpret contemporary styles. Instead, the recording suffered from multiple Parker-influenced compromises. First, Parker had orchestrated a falling out between Elvis and the songwriting duo of Leiber and Stoller years earlier, perceiving them as too influential over Elvis's musical direction. This meant that by the time Elvis recorded their song Bossa Nova Baby, the collaborative relationship that might have elevated the track was long severed. Additionally, Parker insisted on using RCA's Nashville studios and session musicians for most recordings rather than allowing Elvis to work with more innovative producers and musicians. The resulting version of Bossa Nova Baby lacks the authentic Latin flavor and rhythmic innovation that characterized true bossa nova music, instead offering a watered-down, commercialized approximation. Music critic Grail Marcus later described many of Elvis's movie soundtrack recordings as music made for people who didn't particularly like music, a harsh assessment that reflects how Parker's emphasis on marketability over authenticity affected tracks like this one. The Colonel's approach prioritized familiar sounds, that wouldn't challenge mainstream audiences. Perhaps most tellingly, footage from recording sessions shows Elvis initially attempting a more rhythmically complex, energetic version before being guided toward the more conventional arrangement that was ultimately released. This behind-the-scenes glimpse reveals how Parker's influence, even when not directly present in the studio, shaped Elvis's recorded output towards safer, more commercial territory. Number 4. There's no room to Rumba in a sports car. 1963. Can a song title alone make you cringe? Colonel Parker's influence over Elvis's movie soundtrack material reached perhaps its most embarrassing nadir with "There's no room to Rumba in a sports car" from the film Fun in Acapulco. This novelty tune exemplifies the creative bankruptcy of the movie soundtrack system that Parker had locked Elvis into during the 1960s. By this point in Elvis's career, Parker had negotiated deals that required Elvis to record up to a dozen songs for each film soundtrack, often with minimal preparation time. The focus on quantity over quality meant that songwriters would submit virtually anything to fill album slots, resulting in tracks like this one that Elvis reportedly recorded with visible embarrassment. Red West, a member of Elvis's inner circle, later recalled, Elvis would just shake his head when he saw some of these lyrics, but the Colonel had the deal signed, and we had to deliver the songs. The recording session for "There's No Room to Rumba in a Sports Car" was reportedly completed in just 2 takes, with Elvis refusing to invest more time in material he considered beneath his talents. Parker's business model prioritized predictable revenue streams over artistic integrity. Each film contract guaranteed upfront money and required minimal creative risk, creating a safe but stifling environment. While this approach ensured steady income, it gradually eroded Elvis's credibility as a serious musical artist. Music historian Peter Grulnick noted that by 1963, the pattern had become entrenched. Movies were made not to showcase Elvis's talents but to generate soundtrack albums, regardless of the quality of the material. What makes this particularly tragic is that this same period saw revolutionary developments in popular music that Elvis, trapped in Parker's commercial machine, couldn't fully participate in or respond to. Number 3. Do the Clam. 1965. Had you ever wondered how the same artist who recorded soul-stirring gospel albums and pioneered rock and roll ended up singing instructions for a made-up dance? To the Clam, recorded for the 1965 movie Girl, Happy, stands as one of the clearest examples of how Colonel Parker's management choices limited Elvis's artistic expression. By the mid-1960s, Parker had developed a formula for Elvis movies: lightweight plots, exotic locations, plenty of girls, and soundtracks filled with easily digestible songs that required minimal emotional investment. To the Clam perfectly fit this template, a novelty dance number created specifically for a beach party scene in the film. What makes this particularly troubling is the timing. While Elvis was recording Do the Clam, the music world was experiencing seismic shifts, with the Beatles releasing Help and Bob Dylan going electric with Bringing It All Back Home. Parker's insistence on keeping Elvis in his safe, profitable movie bubble meant that one of music's most influential voices was sidelined during one of popular music's most inimitous periods. Elvis's guitarist, Scotty Moore, later commented, "We'd gone from playing with Elvis on stage, where he'd feed off the audience's energy and take songs to new places each night, to these structured soundtrack sessions where everything was predetermined. You could see it wearing him down." The spontaneity and creative fire that had made Elvis a revolutionary force in music had been replaced by formulaic material designed to complement movie scenes rather than express artistic vision. Several Elvis biographers have noted that it was during this period that Elvis began to display signs of depression and disillusionment with his career. Priscilla Presley wrote in her memoir that Elvis would often return home from soundtrack recording sessions in the mid-1960s feeling frustrated and unfulfilled. Do the Clam represents not just a subpar song, but a symbol of the artistic prison that Parker's management decisions had created. Number 2. Yoga is as Yoga does. 1967. Is it possible for a song to be both ahead of its time and completely misguided? Yoga is as Yoga does. Recorded for the 1967 film Easy Come, Easy Go, manages this contradictory feat. This novelty track about yoga, decades before yoga became mainstream in Western culture, shanks how Colonel Parker's approach to Elvis's movie soundtracks bribeatized gimmicky concepts over musical substance. By 1967, Elvis had become increasingly vocal about his dissatisfaction with the movie material Parker arranged for him. Recording sessions for movie soundtracks had become rushed affairs, with Elvis often completing songs in just 1 or 2 takes, having little personal investment in the material. Yoga is as Yoga does, a duet with actress Elsa Lanchester, represents one of the most ridiculous examples of this trend. Music journalist Alana Nash, who wrote extensively about Colonel Parker, noted that Parker deliberately kept Elvis in a creative bubble, isolated from changing musical trends and surrounded by yes men who wouldn't challenge the profitable status quo. This isolation became particularly problematic during the late 1960s, when popular music was evolving rapidly through psychedelia folk rock and more sophisticated production techniques. The irony of Yoga is as Yoga does is that Elvis himself was genuinely interested in Eastern spirituality and would later incorporate elements of it into his personal philosophy. Yet, instead of allowing Elvis to explore these interests in a meaningful way through his music, Parker's formula reduced the concept to a silly novelty song with lyrics like, "You twist your legs like they were made of rubber, and you're getting limber and your spine is loose." Former RCA executive Joan Deary later revealed that Elvis frequently complained about the quality of his movie soundtrack material during this period, saying, Elvis would call the office and ask why he couldn't record songs like Strangers in the Night instead of this movie stuff. Parker's response was always that the movie contracts were too lucrative to jeopardize by deviating from their formula. Number 1. U.S. Mail, 1968. Can a song title be both a pun and a cry for help? Released in 1968, as Elvis was desperately trying to revitalize his career, U.S. Mail represents a critical juncture where Colonel Parker's influence continued to push Elvis toward novelty material when the artist himself was yearning for more substantive work. This Jerry Reed-penned country novelty song, while not from a movie soundtrack, continued the pattern of lightweight material that Parker favored for its commercial predictability. The timing of U.S. Mail is particularly significant. It was released just months before Elvis's legendary 1968 comeback special, which would temporarily free him from Parker's creative restrictions and remind the world of his raw talent. The contrast between the formulaic U.S. Mail and the emotionally charged performances in the special highlights how dramatically Parker's management choices had restrained Elvis's artistic expression. During this period, Elvis had been actively seeking ways to reinvigorate his career. According to several Elvis historians, he had approached Parker numerous times about returning to live performances and recording more challenging material. Parker consistently discouraged these impulses, arguing that the established formula of movies and soundtrack albums provided more reliable income with less risk. Marty Lacker, a member of Elvis's inner circle, later recalled, Elvis was so frustrated by '68, he knew his music career was in trouble, the Stones, and know he was being left behind. This frustration makes U.S. Mail particularly poignant. A novelty song released at a moment when Elvis was desperate to be taken seriously again as an artist. The song itself isn't without merit. Jerry Reed's clever wordplay and Elvis's committed vocal performance show flashes of the talent that had made him a star. But as a single released during a pivotal moment in popular music history, when artists were creating increasingly sophisticated and socially conscious work, U.S. Mail demonstrates how Parker's commercial instincts often put Elvis out of step with his contemporaries. What's most revealing is that once Elvis temporarily broke free from Parker's formula with the 1968 comeback special, the public response was overwhelming. The raw, energetic performances reminded audiences of Elvis's extraordinary talents and sparked a brief career renaissance. This success raises a troubling question about Parker's management approach. How many more artistically significant moments might Elvis have created had he been given more creative freedom throughout his career? Did Elvis's artistic legacy suffer because of business decisions? Could the king of rock and roll have maintained his cultural relevance through the rapidly changing musical landscape of the 1960s with different management? These 8 tracks offer a glimpse into moments when Colonel Parker's influence may have limited Elvis's artistic potential, leaving fans to forever wonder what might have been.